Welcome. I'm Doug Morgan, and you're listening to Uncommon Sense, where we hunt for the truth in the topics you're not supposed to talk about, Christianity and politics. I have been hearing a lot of people lately spouting off about millionaire taxes and the like. In fact, Bernie Sanders, who owns 3 homes, by the way, and is worth close to $3 million himself, even though he's never had a real job. Yeah, that Bernie Sanders recently posted this. Last year, Jeff Bezos sailed on his $500 million yacht to his $55 million wedding in Venice to give his wife a $5 million ring, while his real tax rate was less than 1%. Under my 5% billionaire's wealth tax, Mr. Bezos would owe $12.7 billion and still have $240 billion left over. I mean, wow, can you imagine paying the federal government $12.7 billion? Just the federal government each year? Well, first of all, he doesn't pay 1%, okay? Jeff Bezos actually pays closer to 23% of his income to the federal government alone. And that's not counting state, county tax and all that, right? Second, who are we to tell someone how to spend their own money? The Marxists of this country think that we have the right, that we have no right to our own money and personal property. They think individual freedom and choice is immoral, and that the government, of course, led by them, should decide how much you should have or have not. In fact, your personal property should be theirs for what they call the common good. And in fact, here's a story from the Daily Wire that says Boston Democratic Mayor Michelle Wu wants to expose private property owners looking to lease parking spots to Immigration and Customs Enforcement, that's ICE, in her sanctuary city. The Federal Immigration Enforcement Agency recently posted about its search for property owners across the country, quote, capable of providing surface and or structured vehicle parking spaces in the vicinity of existing or planned ICE facilities, according to the Boston Herald. Now, in Boston, ICE is looking for 249 contiguous parking spaces, and in a interview, Wu said her office will file public records requests to see which private property owners have expressed interest in leasing to ICE in hopes of contacting them. Yeah, get this. Well, we as a city will be filing another FOIA request for any responses that come in from the Boston area so that we know what information they may be sifting through, said Wu. We strongly oppose any expansion of their efforts here and would encourage and will be reaching out to property owners to try to make sure that they're not adding to a surge of unlawful and dangerous activity. Well, the mayor acknowledged that the city can't block private property owners, but said that the officials can inform them that this is not a way to make our communities safer. Yeah, it's not called intimidation, is it? Well, we look to find as much information as possible about what their plans are, what information they might be looking at in order to have the best possible response and protect our communities, she said. Wu cited recent ICE activity, including a recent operation in Maine that resulted in an officer fatality shooting a migrant for her decision to inquire with the federal government. Quote, unfortunately, we already have proof of what happens when they conduct a surge operation, she said. We've seen it in other cities. We've seen it in some, to some extent, in the greater Boston, Massachusetts Commonwealth area. But we don't have to look that far up to Maine to the Twin Cities to see what happens and the life or death consequences when they take officers who are untrained and given a directive that is very far from protecting the public, she said. Boston has already done everything possible to stop ICE from accessing public property. And the mayor said, adding that the city will be doing whatever we can to communicate to private property owners. So they're going to do whatever they can to communicate with private property owners. The Department of Homeland Security responded to Wu's plan Monday, saying the pro-criminal mayor is trying to intimidate Bostonians, knowing, quote, she has zero authority to block ICE from utilizing private property. If private citizens want to allow federal government enforcement onto their own property, they should be allowed to do so. They should not face threats from their radical mayor who shamelessly compared ICE agents to a neo-Nazi group. And that was what they wrote, the agency wrote on X. And it's not just, this Marxist or Mayor Wu in Boston. Mayor Mamdani opened a new front in his ongoing battle with New York City's wealthy after his administration published a searchable database. Yeah, get this. A searchable database identifying affluent property owners who could be subject to the city's proposed Pierre Tier tax. It's a move critics say could expose them to harassment and public safety risks. The database, released by the city's Department of Finance, allows users to search properties and view the names and addresses of owners whose non-primary residences could be subject to the proposed tax. A spokesperson for the department said the publication of the property roll was required by state law. Quote, as per state law, a property roll was released for public inspection. From this list, DOF will identify properties that may be subject to the new non-primary residence property surcharge. That's what a spokesman for the agency said. Now, a person familiar with the process who spoke on the condition of anonymity said the city has publicly released similar property tax rolls every year for many years in accordance with New York state law, according to Fox News. The person said new taxes and surcharges follow the same process. The state passes legislation, a public property roll is published, and the Department of Finance identifies the properties subject to the levy using criteria established by the state. However, critics argue the database goes well beyond traditional public records by compiling the names and addresses of affluent property owners into a single, easy searchable location, potentially creating new privacy and security risks. This is your government doing this. Okay, the debate carries added weight in America's largest city, where public safety remains a persistent political issue, and affluent residents have long cited crime as a top concern. Now, while property ownership records have long been public, opponents say the city's decision to, agitate them into a dedicated database could make wealthy homeowners more vulnerable to harassment and potential violence. Yeah, that's never happened, right? Nobody's ever been killed because they're wealthy, right? In New York City, right? Well, City Hall has defended the database as a transparency tool designed to help property owners determine whether they could be affected by the proposed tax and understand how to seek an exemption. They attack anybody who questions his decision, and there's no question they'll harass every New Yorker who provides housing for a living. Is what they're saying now. Meanwhile, the Real Estate Board of New York President James Wellen argued that the database also illustrates how broadly the proposed tax could reach beyond the ultra wealthy residents its supporters have emphasized. Although Madani initially promoted the proposal as a tax on secondary homes worth more than $5 million and owned by the ultra wealthy and global elites, the final rules use different Department of Finance valuation thresholds depending on the type of property. And this is according to the New York Post. They said over 960,000 residents could be listed in the database, which makes it possible to search and download property owners' information, including their names and addresses, of course. Quotes, by publishing a database of properties that might be subject to the tax before the tax is even enacted, City Hall has only added to the confusion surrounding the proposal. What this database really demonstrates is that the second home tax is a far broader and more complicated than its supporters have suggested. Policymakers should take a hard look at the many homeowners who could be swept in despite not fitting the profile of the ultra wealthy residences that this tax was supposedly designed to target. So yeah, I mean this is just again intimidation of private property owners. In fact, earlier this year, the mayor stood outside Citadel founder Ken Griffin's 24,000 square foot Central Park South penthouse that he purchased for a record $238 million to promote his proposal to raise taxes on the second homes worth more than $5 million after previously criticizing billionaire hedge fund manager over his personal wealth. And the video singled out Griffin by name. In fact, he stood outside the property with it in the background. I mean, Griffin later called the video creepy and weird, arguing it put him in harm's way because it highlighted his residence while promoting higher taxes on the wealthy. Longtime Republican strategist Colin Reed argued that the database and Madami's broader rhetoric against wealthy New Yorkers could carry dangerous consequences and highlighted concerns about political violence. He said it's bad enough that the mayor is demonizing success and upward mobility that has so long defined the American dream, and doing so within the city that has defined American capitalism, is what Reed said. But he continued by saying, but to do so by pitting various classes against one another is beneath the office he holds. So, yeah, I mean, this is classic Marxism. This is where you pit the different classes, so to speak. You create classes, and then you say to one class, "Oh, well, they're oppressors, and you're being oppressed, and you need to rise up against them." Yeah. So the clash has also revived a broader debate over whether New York risks driving away the wealthy residents and businesses that have long underpinned its economy. Griffin, whose Fortune Forbes estimates at roughly $50 billion, moved Citadel Global headquarters from Chicago to Miami in 2022 after years of criticizing the Windy City's policies and the crime and the business climate. We're seeing a lot of that, by the way. We're seeing a lot of blue state regulations and taxes and things just driving out businesses, and they are going to red states. And the departure of Griffin, it marked a break from Chicago for Griffin, where he built one of the world's largest hedge funds and helped cement the city as a global financial hub. And he has since warned that New York could face similar consequences if policymakers pursue an agenda that he believes is hostile to high-income residences and businesses. So yeah, it's just Marxism, just rebaked is really what it is here. At the center of the debate is whether the city can ask more of its wealthiest residents without weakening the tax base that helps fund, municipal government. And you may say, well, Doug, come on, this doesn't really mean that they want to take your private property and equity away from you, right? Okay, if that's what you believe, here's Mamdani's housing authority head. This is the head of the housing authority for the largest city in America, and this is Sia Weaver, and this is what she thinks of private property.
I think the reality is that for centuries we've really treated property as an individualized good and not a collective good, and we are going to transitioning to treating it as a collective good and towards a model of shared equity will require that we think about it differently, and it will mean that families, especially white families, but some POC families who are homeowners as well, are going to have a different relationship to property than the one that we currently have.
Do you hear what she's saying? What she's saying is right again out of the Marxist playbook. She's saying that you don't have a right to your private property. You don't have a right to your equity in your home. That you need to have a different relationship with your private property. And basically, what that means is give it to them, the government. Your equity and your private property, that all needs to be given to the common good. That's scary. And I and it brings me to this article. And I thought this was pretty good. A growing rift between, and this came out of the Daily Wires, a growing rift between Democrats and their growing socialist wing is threatening to alienate the very voters the party needs to win elections, including people who have lived under communist regimes. On Mark Halperin's The Morning Meeting platform, a Puerto Rican born voter with Cuban heritage living in Florida sounded the alarm over the Democrats' far left drift and announced a permanent breakup with the party that he used to support. Quote, I'm a pretty open minded guy. I voted Democrat many times, and I was a big supporter of Hillary Clinton. I'm sorry. Anyway, I continue. His quote, I thought she was great. But the way this Democratic Party is going now, I don't even want to hear it. This is what the voter named Gary said. And he says, I'm just a Republican going forward. I can't have it. I can't have it. It's just insulting to me the fact that the Democratic Party is allowing these parasites, he calls it, that's his word, parasites, into the party. It's offensive. I've had uncles that have been imprisoned in Cuba for just being part of the Baptist church, he said. Well, since President Donald Trump's reelection, the Democratic establishment has watched its leftist wing barnstorm the country, raking up one victory after another. And socialist Zoran Mamdani, upset in New York City's mayoral election, just highlights this. The socialist aligned left also steamrolled its way through Washington D.C. and Denver, and then succeeded in nominating even Graham Plattner before, of course, he had to bow out for U.S. Senator in Maine. The movement scored another huge win earlier when Michigan Democrats nominated Abdul El Sayed for the U.S. Senate, delivering a humiliating blow to the party establishment, which failed to stop him from advancing to the pivotal November showdown with Trump-endorsed Republican Mike Rogers. Results showed El Sayed won younger and more educated voters, while his establishment-backed rival, Representative Haley Stevens, performed strongest among blacks and the working class voters, highlighting the DSA disconnect with traditionally faithful Democratic voting blocs. Quote, what would you like to see the Democratic Party do? Halperin asked Gary, who responded with, I don't know. I think it's part of an indoctrination of a lot of upper class white young kids that are clueless. I think that's really the base of the DSA. It's not the working class. It's just not. I don't know the answer. I don't care, Gary said. Most Latinos living in the US have a favorable view of capitalism. That's good. With 82% of Cubans reportedly negative views towards socialism. And this is according to a 2022 Pew Research Center survey, by the way. On top of that, the DSA membership is overwhelmingly white and has long struggled to recruit a more racially diverse group of organizers. Anti-socialist and anti-communist messaging has long resonated with Florida's Latino voters, who make up nearly a quarter of the state's 2024 electorate and back Trump, according to exit polls. At the first of its kind Republican midterm convention in Dallas, GOP leaders plan to take that message nationwide, framing November's election as a choice between common sense and crazy. I, I can't wait for that to come out. Well, a Republican source told the Daily Wire that the convention will spotlight the socialist movement's most fringe positions on gender, um, pol- uh, um, policy efforts, efforts to cancel Thanksgiving, policing, as well as the growing electoral influence of leftist dreamer Hassan Piker, who has admitted to colluding with Cuba's communist regime. Failed presidential candidate Hillary Clinton is also worried that Republicans' anti-communist messaging would sink socialist candidates and jeopardize the party's chances of retaking control of Congress. During a podcast appearance with liberal tech journalist Kara Swisher, Clinton raised concerns about the eligibility of El Sayed and other DSA-backed candidates, saying, quote, "You're not going to convince Republican voters in Michigan, and the real fight will be how do we make sure that people who voted for Haley feel comfortable voting for El Sayed, and how do we get independents to feel comfortable?" Clinton asked, "And how do we see that it's not just about Michigan, but the Republican messaging is communist, socialist? It's going to be very effective attack." Yeah, so this is just another example of the fact that Marxism has taken over the Democratic Party. They are in control now. Not every Democrat is a Marxist, but they have control of that party now, and it's really concerning. In fact, Chloe Trapanado had an opinion piece that I thought was really good when she said, "Let's check in on the People's Republic of New York City." Oh, the announcement of 2,000 free Broadway tickets for New York City public high school students delivered in Mandarin. How thoughtful, how necessary. Never mind that our commander in chief signed an executive order making English the official language of the United States. No need for the subtitles, Mr. Mayor. Maybe just get the kids a free, Duolingo subscription instead, to each according to his needs. The communist, terror sympathizing tyrant of New York City will wave this off as a cute, harmless, inclusive gesture for the children, of course. But it's more nefarious than that. It's one more trick and one more brick in this anti-American crusade to subvert every ideal this country was built on. These free, in quotes, tickets, donated seats from producers who already sell out their tourists anyway, are just Mamdani's latest chance to redistribute what he didn't earn and call it justice for the theater kids. Every New Yorker should be able to afford a Broadway, he says. Should they? I don't realize. I didn't realize a night at the theater was a constitutional right. I thought I had a right to work hard, keep what I earn, and spend it how I choose. But apparently, that one's negotiable now. This is peak Mandani, a cutesy social post papering over a very expensive habit. Nothing he hands out is actually free. His free buses would run the city $1.1 billion a year, and fares have gone up anyway. His free child care plan is pegged at $6 billion, with outside estimates already creeping toward $9 billion, because they always do. But trust him, sending your pride and joy off with a government employee to a park is so worth the tax hike. His free housing push is set to produce 180 affordable units for a finished price tag of $22 billion. Somebody remind me why rent just hit a record $6,655 a month. And don't forget the Pending Delivery Project Act, which punishes Amazon subcontractors for the crime of subcontracting. Yeah, enjoy the higher delivery fees, and the theater, the bus, the rent, the children, the mayor majority that the mayor has deemed them a right, and bequeathed you a bill. And some may think I'm being too critical about the Broadway bash, but that's because I know it's bread and circuses. He has a plan, and he's following it to the letter. He's Bane with a bow tie. At a 2021 Young Democrat Socialists of America conference, then Assemblyman Mandani was explicit. Student debt and cancellation was fine to campaign on. But socialists need to organize around the less popular causes like boycott and divestment and sanctions. The campaign that would love to see Israel wiped off the map and the end goal of seizing the means of production. Where have I heard that one before? The network around this Marxist mayor makes the rhetoric a lot less abstract. Neville Roy Singham, the billionaire Marxist from Saigon, has poured hundreds of millions into left-wing nonprofits that reliably echo Chinese Communist Party talking points. And his family has done campaign work for Mandani. Singham himself, like plenty of Mandani's other allies, invokes Mao, calls Western capitalism fascism, and pushes a new world order narrative that quietly erases America's role in defeating actual fascism in World War II. Which is why a Marxist delivered a speech in Mandarin should unsettle you. China's communist history is not abstract. It's tangible, terrifying. The Great Leap Forward produced the deadliest famine on record. The Cultural Revolution delivered mass persecution and economic ruin. One-party rule continues today. Soft power language outreach and redistributionist policy deserve a little more scrutiny than they're coming from Maoists and more broadly from America haters. So Mandani speaks Mandarin to signal that you don't need to assimilate to this oppressive colonizing country. Stay as an un-American as possible. In fact, he sure is. The Uganda native released a video slamming America as a nation of contradictions on her birthday from behind George Washington's desk. And he published a target list naming, as we covered earlier, the names and addresses of New Yorkers, 100 worst landlords along thousands of New Yorkers who own second homes in the city. He said to the boots of the New York City PD, well, they're laced by the IDF. And his father wrote a book blaming 9/11 on the United States. He's been photographed with an unindicted co-conspirator of the 1993 WTC bombing, and families of 9/11 victims have made clear they don't want him anywhere near this year's 20th or 250th anniversary ceremony. He does not like it here. He is trying to tear it down with a Marxist sandwich. Promise something good, then say and do things that quietly wreck the place underneath it. And to be fair, the Champagne Socialist also posted the ticket announcement in Spanish. They said he speaks 7 languages. He must have picked that one up somewhere between the $70,000 a year progressive private school on the Upper West Side and the $50,000 plus a year liberal arts college in Maine. And thank goodness that all that education is finally paying off in the public sector, where he does nothing to lecture, pose for photos, none of it. He doesn't do anything but that. The polished videos, the permanent Joker smile, the quiet confidence that no one will connect the multilingual theater, giveaways to the man who once called seizing the means of production an end goal. Welcome to the CCP of New York City. I thought that was pretty good, and I think that what we're seeing is more and more Marxists not trying to hide the ball. They are coming right out and they're saying, this is what I want to do. And it's straight from Karl Marx's playbook. It is that we as individuals, we don't have rights. We as individuals, we don't have the right to private property. We can't have that kind of equity in the hands of individuals. We need to take that at the point of a gun, and we need to then have it part of the common good. Everybody needs your property and your equity. And that's what they're doing. They're coming right out and they're proposing this. They're coming right out and saying this. And I would like to hear what you think on it. Of course, you can always do that at uncommonsensepodcast.com. Thank you for listening.
This podcast is a production of Morganite Communications.